Hawks, Hoops, Tawk, and Squawk. Allen Iverson's best chance at winning an NBA championship. Now, a couple of weeks ago, AI had posted on his Instagram page, the official AI3. It's a picture of him and Shaq from the 2001 NBA Finals. Either Game 3, Game 4, Game 5. Because Iverson's wearing the Sixers home white. And Shaq's wearing the Road Lakers colors. Anyway, the photo is from the 2001 Finals where we all know the Lakers beat Philly 4-1 to win their second straight title in the midst of their three-peat in the early 2000s. The caption on the photo, "The only reason I don't have a ring, LOL, hashtag greatest big man ever." Shaq responds, "You don't need one. You one of the greatest and a Hall of Famer first ballot. No questions asked." Now that's real honorable of Shaq to say that. It's funny because he tells AI he doesn't need a ring, but yet on the Inside the NBA TNT panel, he's always clowning Charles Barkley about not having a ring. But anyway, it made me think, and I did a video a few months back on the raw deal of Allen Iverson. Is on my page if you go back a few months. Be sure, if you haven't done so already, to subscribe to the channel. Now, while the video I did a few months back detailed how the Sixers were robbed of some playoff runs due to suspect officiating and amidst the league's hate for Iverson, this video, I'm really going to analyze the year Allen Iverson definitely should have won a championship with the Philadelphia 76ers. No, it's not 2001. That Lakers team was just too dominant. I will say, had the Sixers have been healthier, we could have extended that series to possibly 6, maybe even 7 games. But even saying that is a stretch. That was the prime Lakers team. Definitely the best Lakers team of that three-peat. So no, it's not 2001. The Lakers, regardless, still would have owned that era from 2000 to 2002. But Iverson and the Sixers definitely could have won a championship in the 2002-2003 season, which was the 40th anniversary season of the 76ers being in Philadelphia. Now, people will look back and be like, oh, nah, that team got bounced in the second round by Detroit, but we've already covered this. The Sixers were flat out robbed that series. Not only that, they should have never been the 4th seed anyway. That was the year they definitely should have been the 1st seed. And instead of finishing 48-34, which was 4th in the East and 2nd in the Atlantic Division, that team should have won 58 games. Yes, the Sixers got chiseled out of like 10 wins that season. First of all, that was one of Iverson's finest seasons. Not his best scoring year. Definitely wasn't his best scoring year. He averaged 27.6 points per game that season. 5.5 assists. 2.7 steals. That's the only season in Philadelphia where he played all 82 games. He would play 82 games and starting all 82 games one at a time in his career, which was his lone full season in Denver 2007, 2008. But 2002, 2003, Iverson played and started in all 82 games, 42.5 minutes a game, shot 41% from the floor, only 27% from three, you know what I mean, which isn't, it's not necessarily terrible, but it's not great. Let's see, the 27.6 he averaged. He finished third in scoring that year behind Tracy McGrady and Kobe Bryant. But overall, that was a good Sixers team. And people will be like, well, they had just traded Mutombo. They didn't have a real center. I'm telling you, Sixers definitely had a great chance of winning the championship that year. Had the powers that be, weren't against the answer for his image, which led to the Sixers being chiseled out of wins, which will ultimately affect their playoff results. Now, in the year, Iverson's backcourt mate, Eric Snow, averaged just a shade under 13 points a game. That is a career high for Eric Snow. 6.6 assists, 3.7 rebounds, and 1.6 steals. Also played and started in all 82 games. And for a point guard, Eric Snow was by far the best point guard. But as a point guard, he was solid and he was a great defender. And that was Snow's best year as a pro. Definitely his best year as a pro. Keith Van Horn, who was traded the previous offseason from the New Jersey Nets for Dikembe Mutombo, averaged just under 16 points a game, 7 rebounds, played in 74 games, started 73. Solid performer, Keith Van Horn. Never lived up to his number 2 overall pick status, but he was solid in his lone season with the Sixers. Derek Coleman, you know what I mean, by this time, Derek Coleman was a shell of himself, but he could get it going on certain nights. There was a few games that season where DC really did impress, despite only appearing in 64 games with 35 starts. You know, this is his second tenure with the Sixers, his 5th overall season as a 76er. He had a couple of 20-point games that season, some double-digit rebounding games. Even in the playoff, he had some solid performances. Kenny Thomas acquired him. How many games into the season did we? It was like midway through the season, but he appeared in 46 games with 28 starts. Averaged just over 10 points a game, 8.5 rebounds. Another solid player. Aaron McKee, still the 6th man, 9 points a game. Played in 80 games and started in 40. Now you look at this roster, you'd be like, that's not a championship roster. Okay. Like we've already stated, the league's hatred for Iverson. They didn't want to see him on the national spotlight. So that meant that the Sixers couldn't be a true contending NBA team. Meanwhile, you have the New Jersey Nets, who only won 49 games. They won the division by default due to the Sixers being chiseled out of some wins, and we'll get to those wins in a minute. But anyway, the Nets 49-33. You know, they had the Nets. I'm not going to hold you. They had a solid team led by the great Jason Kidd, averaged just under 19 points a game, just under 9 assists. But when you look at that roster, there's no way that this team would beat the Sixers in a 7-game playoff series. And that's why the chips fell the way it did. That's just why they fell the way it did. Notice that for those that pay attention to every little detail, at the end of the 2002-2003 season, the Nets had already clinched the division. The Sixers season had ended already. They finished 48-34. Meanwhile, the Nets were 49-32, heading into the final game of the regular season. Now, this game means nothing for the Nets. They've already locked up the second seed, and they've already clinched the Atlantic Division title. So there's really no need to play them against Indiana. But had the Nets won that game, the Pacers would have wound up 4th, and the Sixers would have finished 3rd, which would have met Sixers and Nets in the Eastern Conference semifinals. The Nets knew they didn't want that smoke with the Sixers. They knew. Because let me see, I believe we beat them in the season series that year. Let's give me a second. Yeah, we beat them the season series 3-1, just like I thought. I thought we beat them 3-1 that season series, but I just had to double check just for verification. We beat the Nets 3 out of 4 times that season. The only time they beat us was February the 5th when they blew us out in Philly, 111-85. And I remember that game because Ed Snyder walked up to Billy King during the first half, and they had a long chat. And this was the final game before the All-Star break. And after the All-Star break, the Sixers came out a completely different team and finished the second half of the season 23-10. They were 25-24 headed into the All-Star break. So now, fast forward to April 16th, the Nets' final regular season game. The Nets knew they didn't want that smoke with the Sixers in the second round. So what do? I mean, win or lose this game, it doesn't affect their standings, their playoff seeding at all. So there's really no need to risk injuring or to risk their players playing to risk injury or anything. So what do? They rest their players. The Pacers win. So the Pacers now, who had the tiebreaker against the Sixers because the two teams both finished 48-34. The Pacers had the tiebreaker, so now they're the 3rd seed, which means the Sixers are 4th and have to face the 5th-seeded New Orleans Hornets in the first round. Whereas had we had the 3rd seed, we could have gotten some payback on the 6th-seeded Celtics. But anyway, it should have never came down to that anyway, because the Sixers were chiseled out of a good 10 wins during that season. Now, some of the losses, and me and others have talked about this, it was some games during that season you just knew that the refs were being biased against Iverson. It was one game, I believe, in Denver where it was during a West Coast trip at the end of the year when they called all of these I'm going back to look. I remember that game they was playing in Denver. March 2nd, 2003, I believe, when Iverson fouled out. Now, the Sixers won that game. We managed to win 100-94. But the Nuggets was terrible that year. This was the season before they drafted Carmelo Anthony. So the Nuggets was terrible that year. But I remember they called 3 straight offensive fouls on Iverson in that game. He wound up fouling out the game. It was a lot of suspect and biased officiating against the answer and his team that season. Definitely. You know what I mean? Starting with the very first game of the season opener against Tracy McGrady in Orlando Magic. I was at that game in Orlando. And I remember Iverson getting so irate at the biased officiating that he was cussing and everything during the timeout. And I remember people telling me that had watched that game on TV that they heard him saying, "Get the fuck out of here," blah, like just, he was mad, just going off. And that happened a lot that season between him and the officials. A lot. And there was another game, I'm about to pull it up. It was a December 4th game. No, not December 4th. Give me a second. I remember it was against Boston. January 20th, 2003. I believe that was a Martin Luther King Day game when the Celtics made this real vicious comeback and Antoine Walker had a buzzer beater shot. The Celtics win 100-99. It was a lot of suspect and biased shit going on in that game. A lot. So like I said, the Sixers should have finished that season 58-24. They would have ran away with the top seed in the East. It would have been a first round showdown against T-Mac and the Magic. That would have been one for, you think AI and Vince? Now AI and Vince in 2001, it can't get any more fantastic than that. But AI and T-Mac in 2003 would have been a classic of his own. Sixers will win that series, no doubt. That's probably a 5-game series. Sixers will probably beat them 4-1. Maybe 4-2. Maybe just off the strength of T-Mac, he would have led the Magic to a couple wins. But either way, the Sixers win that series as the first seed. Second round, I would say, because had the Sixers finished first, Detroit still would have finished second. New Jersey still would have finished third. Yeah, Indiana would have still finished fourth. And it would have been in Indiana and New Orleans in 2003. That would have been a classic first round matchup too. That series could have went either way. But whoever the winner would have been of that series would have been the Sixers' second round opponent. I have Philly winning that in 6 games too. The road to the finals wouldn't have been sweet. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, New Jersey, who in real time went on to sweep Detroit, probably still would have swept Detroit, and we would have spanked the Nets in the conference finals. I'm not talking like the Nets are sweet, but seeing how we would have had home court advantage, I don't see that being a 7-game series. 5-6 game series at the most. Win the East. Go to the NBA Finals. The San Antonio Spurs. Now, don't get me wrong. Tim Duncan was a beast that season. He won back-to-back MVPs, and he would eventually win Finals MVP. Now, that San Antonio team finished 60-22. David Robinson playing in his final year. Tim Duncan smack dab in his prime. A young second year Tony Parker, who became a household name. Steven Jackson is solid. You know what I mean? Philly native and fellow Overbrook Panther Malik Rose. He was solid off the bench. A rookie Manu Ginobili, solid. He made his name during those 2003 playoffs. Don't get me wrong, the Spurs wouldn't have been an easy out, but I put it like this. If that New Jersey Nets team took the Spurs 6 games, we could beat that Spurs team in 7. And people will be like, oh, Hawk, you far-fetched, you talking like a homer. Nah. Had the Sixers had not been robbed, chiseled out of regular season wins, which altered their playoff picture, followed by more suspect and biased officiating in the playoffs, we would have won the East. That Sixers team would have had a chip on their shoulder, and we could have pulled off a great upset against the Spurs. Tim Duncan still would have got his numbers. I mean, he's one of the greats. You know, and we wouldn't have had nobody to stop him. But Iverson would have got his. Our role players were solid that year. Eric Snow, the best year of his career. Aaron McKee, a determined vet. Derek Coleman wanting to put the icing on the cake at the end of his career, seeking a ring. Keith Van Horn going against the top player from his draft class to prove himself. And don't get me wrong, Keith Van Horn ain't nowhere near no Tim Duncan status. But I just think that challenge might have brought out the best in the Pale Riders. I mean, that was Van Horn's nickname. Kenny Thomas, a solid player. You know what I mean? The young Philly native John Salmons learning from the veterans on the team. Tyrone Hill, who came back, who we signed towards the end of the year, would have brought that veteran experience. You know, this is far from the best Sixers team ever. But I just think this was Iverson's best chance to win the championship with the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, we'll never know now, obviously, but of course this is all, speak of hypotheticals, little Hawks Hoops talking Squawk, but that would have been Allen Iverson's best chance to win the championship with the Philadelphia 76ers. And that would have been the first NBA title for head coach Larry Brown. Now, had that happened, LB possibly never steps down. He possibly finishes out his contract with the Sixers. There is no Randy Ayers and the Chris Ford and the Jim O'Brien era. You know what I mean? Who's to say that the Pistons would even win a championship? Because let's say LB doesn't go there. Sixers win the chip and he stays with the team. You know, perhaps they bring that same team back the following year, even maybe making a couple of minor adjustments. But this is all what ifs, hypotheticals, Hawks Hoops talking Squawk. Anyway, be sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more Hoops talk and content. But in closing, let me say, yeah, that definitely would have been their best chance at a ring. Iverson's best chance. Let's just say they finished the playoff run, because this was the first year that the first round became a best-of-7 series. So let's say they beat the Magic in the first round. Let's just say it goes 6 games. 4-2. Then the next round, let's just say New Orleans upsets Indiana. And Iverson still has his 55 points in game 1 and his 45 points in the game 6 clincher in NOLA. Sixers again win 4-2. Now let's just say the Nets push them 6 games. You know, the Sixers win the first 2 in Philly. Nets win the next 2 in Jersey or whatever. Philly wins game 5, then goes back to New Jersey and win game 6. And I would have been at all the games in New Jersey because I used to go back and forth to the Nets games anyway during that era. Although I was always a little salty that it was the Nets repping the East in the finals. As a hoops fanatic, I was always there anyway. I just love the game of NBA basketball. But anyway, Sixers beat the Nets in 6. So that's 6-6-6 to win the East. In the finals, they beat the Spurs in 7. You know, they win all 3 games at Philly and win a miracle game 7 in San Antonio. That would have been sensationally fantastic. Allen Iverson wins NBA Finals MVP to go along with the 2002-2003 league MVP, because that Philly won the 58 games that they would have won hadn't they been chiseled out of wins. Iverson would have perhaps been league MVP. And that is no disrespect to Tim Duncan, who had a great season. But that would have been sensationally fantastic. But anyway, stay tuned for more Hawks Hoops Talking Squawk. Hawk out.